Netflix is known for running series and documentaries on subjects that don't fit the model traditional media prefers. Nothing proves that point more than the latest hit show, Tiger King. For anyone who hasn't watched the 7-part docuseries, a brief summary can never do the series justice. The documentary survives the titular Tiger King, Joe Exotic, and his feud with animal rights activist Carole Baskin. The bizarre story involves murder conspiracies, hired killings, arson, animal abuse, and more. The documentary makers fit a lot into the 317-minute runtime, but amazingly, there are more insane stories that didn't make it to the final series. These are 5 untold stories behind the Netflix documentary Tiger King. Number 5. Joe Exotic, whose real name is Joseph Allen Passage, is currently serving a 22-year prison sentence for hiring a man to kill Carole Baskin, as well as multiple cases of animal abuse. Despite this, many fans of the show believe he's the real victim of the story. After the series premiere, #FreeJoeExotic was trending on Twitter and Instagram as fans argued his innocence. Even US President Donald Trump has taken an interest in the case. Fans may not have been as sympathetic if the showrunners hadn't cut out much of the darker side of this final product. Director Rebecca Chalkin has described the 57-year-old as categorically racist and revealed how filmmakers were forced to cut very unsettling comments made by Joe Exotic, with Chalkin also explaining how they weren't important to the story and that she believes Joe Exotic's racism was down to a lack of exposure. But the comments could have helped the audience see through the larger-than-life image that he tries to portray. Co-director Eric Goode also emphasizes how Joe Exotic was cruel and inhumane to animals and people alike. While the documentary doesn't gloss over this, it's implied that filmmakers didn't show the true extent of the animal abuse. Perhaps most shockingly is the allegations against Joe Exotic, allegedly faking prostate cancer to raise money. Journalist Robert Moore had hosted a podcast called Joe Exotic Tiger King long before Netflix made the zookeeper a household name. Over time, he built a relationship with Joe Exotic and was able to delve deeper into his insane story. After the Netflix show was released, Moore posted many surprising facts about the man and his company to Twitter. He told his followers that Joe Exotic lied about having prostate cancer and bone marrow cancer for a long time. He allegedly told his fans that he was dying and raised money for his treatment on his Facebook page. While he's known to have suffered from multiple health problems, the cancer story was supposedly false. He was actually in the hospital due to an infected prostate, dehydration, and a bad outbreak of herpes. TV producer Rick Kirkham, who was working with the Tiger King on the reality show, also claims that he called him from the hospital so that they could film while he was on his IV drip. There isn't enough evidence either way to say for sure whether Joe Exotic faked cancer for monetary gain, but he definitely didn't waste the opportunity to get the publicity. Number 4. One of the biggest conspiracy theories that has arisen from Tiger King is that the animal rights activist Carole Baskin was involved in the disappearance of her husband, Don Lewis. Self-made millionaire Lewis disappeared without a trace in August of 1997. Carole became the main suspect for many amateur sleuths and Lewis's own daughters, although police have said she's not a suspect. Lewis was known to be involved with shady characters, loaning money to Costa Rican gangsters, which prompted Carole to include disappearance on the list of events that would activate power of attorney. He also suffered with a number of mental health problems. When Lewis disappeared, there were allegedly sightings in Costa Rica where he had property, and his van was found at a local airport. Despite investigations by police and a private investigator hired by Carole, Lewis was never found. He was legally declared dead 5 years after his disappearance. The documentary goes deeper into Lewis's disappearance, with a whole episode dedicated to the mystery surrounding Carole's ex-husband and the theory held by his daughters that Carole killed him and fed his body to tigers. There's no evidence for the theory, despite its perfect fit for the wild world of Tiger King. Many people online still believe that Carole was involved in her husband's death though, including her own former boyfriend, Jay. Jay and Baskin dated in 2002, around the time that Lewis was legally declared dead. In October of that year, Jay filed for a restraining order against Baskin, claiming he feared for his life. When Jay asked what would happen if her husband returned, Carole allegedly told him that a dead body cannot talk. He told police she'd threatened to get rid of him by whatever means necessary, and when human remains were found on the property, she told Jay that she hoped it wasn't on her property or she would be in deep trouble. However, Jay's case was dismissed and the restraining order was denied. For those who suspect Baskin is responsible for her husband's disappearance, the failed restraining order is further proof that she was and still is a dangerous woman. The exact opposite could also be argued though, as there wasn't enough evidence to prove that Baskin was a threat to Jay. Police are using the renewed interest in the case to appeal for information surrounding Lewis's disappearance. Since the documentary aired, police have received over 6 tips a day, but are no closer to the truth than they were 20 years ago. Number 3. One celebrity that knew about Joe Exotic before the documentary aired is NBA star Shaquille O'Neal. O'Neal briefly appeared early in the series, which showed archive footage of him touring the zoo in 2014, and referencing the eccentric zookeeper in an NBA broadcast the following night. In the broadcast, he said, "Shout out to Exotic Joe, I got 2 more tigers." He also filmed a segment for Joe's YouTube channel. Joe shows him a liger cub, explaining that the cat is the offspring of a lion father and tiger mother. O'Neal jokes that Joe has just gifted him the cub. Since the Netflix documentary, O'Neal has distanced himself from Joe. The basketball player explained on his podcast that he stopped visiting the zoo when he found out about Joe's shady dealings. He also clarified that, though he's made donations to the zoo for food, he never purchased any animals. He added that he never had any business dealings with Joe either. O'Neal may, however, have had business dealings with another star of the show. Jeff Lowe took over ownership of the park after Joe filed for bankruptcy. Lowe has a warrant for his arrest in Las Vegas, where he made an illegal petting zoo for holding exotic animals without a license. O'Neal has kept in touch with the zoo's new owner even after the documentary, and could be a big part of Lowe's plan to reopen the zoo. Lowe boasted that he had FaceTimed with O'Neal just the day after the documentary was released. O'Neal had apparently called to see if the zoo needed anything, and he also shared multiple images of O'Neal visiting the zoo and feeding the animals. Back in 2018, Lowe shared a photo of himself and O'Neal, captioned, "Hey everyone, we'd like you to meet our new business owner." The extent of O'Neal's relationship with Lowe is currently unknown. The filmmaker Good told the LA Times that he thought it would be unlikely that O'Neal's handlers would allow him to invest in any of Lowe's projects. O'Neal has yet to address his relationship with Lowe, though animal rights activists have called for him to cut ties with the businessman. Number 2. With the larger-than-life characters and story akin to something from a Hollywood scriptwriter, it can be easy for viewers to forget that people featured in Tiger King are real people and their lives have been significantly altered by the show. While Joe and Lowe were pleased with the end result, for Carole Baskin, the documentary felt like a betrayal. She now receives death threats from fans of the show, with strangers having gotten a hold of her phone number to give her even more abuse. It may be easy for some to brush off threats as a joke by bored fans, but Baskin has already had to deal with one plot against her life, so it's understandable that she hadn't taken the threats so lightly. Baskin has detailed how she felt unsafe leaving her home, as fans of the show have waited out front of her home. She claimed that she could no longer keep her phone due to pranks, calls, and death threats, which is interfering with her work. Up to 30 people wait outside the Big Cat Rescue, the animal sanctuary that she runs, even though the business has been closed due to the coronavirus pandemic, and drones fly over her Florida home all the time. Carole and her husband, Harold Baskin, have called the filmmakers the biggest con artists and claimed the documentary was completely different from the project they were sold. The Baskins opened up their sanctuary to filmmakers with the expectations the documentary would be about the abuse of cats, rather than the feud between Carole and Joe, which she never saw as significant. Baskin also didn't believe the previously mentioned disappearance of her husband was relevant to the documentary. Even though the filmmakers say she spoke about her husband and personal life willingly, Baskin claims she thought she was giving details for background context. An entire episode focused on Lewis's disappearance, though. As well as the renewed accusations that she had something to do with his disappearance, Baskin felt the topic distracted from the issue of animal abuse. Number 1. Some of the most disturbing counts of Joe Exotic's animal abuse would not come to light until after the docuseries was released. Those closest to the Tiger King have come forward to share their stories, so the world knows what he's truly like. Joe's niece, 31-year-old Chelsea Putman, would do odd jobs at the zoo on and off between 1999 and 2017. In that time, she believes her uncle switched from actually caring about his animals to treating them as moneymakers. She says she saw things 100 times more evil than what was shown in the documentary. In an interview with the British newspaper, the Daily Mail, Chelsea went into detail about some of her uncle's crimes against both the animals in his care and his own parents. She hopes her stories will deter fans from her uncle, including celebrities such as Cardi B. The GW Zoo didn't only house cats, but also a number of monkeys and circus bears. When one monkey had a baby, Joe attempted to take the infant to sell it. He shot the mother with a tranquilizer dart so that he could take the baby, but the single dart didn't work, so he fired more and more until she finally fell asleep. Luckily, the monkey survived, but Joe pried the child from her and sold it. Chelsea also claimed that her uncle would freeze dead tiger cubs to sell to taxidermists. At least 10 cubs were allegedly frozen. Joe initially told Chelsea the cubs were being donated to research at the Texas A&M University, but later asked her to take one to a taxidermist to get it stuffed, and she refused. In another story, Chelsea described how her uncle would convince local stores to donate dog and cat food for the bears, only to sell them for profit. This is on top of using out-of-date meat for the pizzas at his restaurant, which was mentioned in the Netflix show. Some of Chelsea's worst allegations of animal abuse are too disturbing to share here, but even if some are true, it's understandable why she believes her uncle should have been given life imprisonment. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. If you loved it, maybe consider sharing and clicking that notification bell. But I've been Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.